we are going to start with, because we're relating fractions and decimals today, I just want you to tell me, actually, let's do this. I'm going to give you about 20 or 30 seconds. I want you to tell me everything you know about 1/10. In your notebook, write down everything you know about 1/10. And then when you have some ideas written down, will you just shout them out for me? What does it look like? How can you create it? What does it look like as a fraction? What's it look like as a decimal? How'd you explain it to someone? Anything about 1/10. Ridian, will you start for us since you know you're our decimal lover? What is 1/10?
Well, if you want to turn 1/10 into a decimal, you need to think about division. Division and fractions kind of link up.
They exactly link up. You're right. So what would that look like?
So you know how you can't divide 3 with a 10? You can think of that as shrunk down.
Okay. How would we shrink that down?
1/10. So we can, draw a circle.
Okay, 1 second. I'm going to switch my Wi-Fi over to get it going a little bit faster on my camera here, okay?
Okay.
All right. There we go. This will work better.
So if you draw a circle and divide it into half.
Okay, so you want me to draw a circle and then divide it into half, you say?
And then divide it.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. They don't have to be equal. Just make sure it's 10 pretty close together parts.
So you want 10. So everyone, let's do this with Ridian. He's saying take a circle and we're going to split it into 10 parts. So each half will have 5 sides, right, Ridian?
Yes.
Okay.
So now, you know how 10 equals 1 times 10?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can think of that kind of shrunk down as 0.1 times 1.
All right.
You shrink it down by dividing it by 10.
Okay, just 1 second. That you want me to put a 1/10 like a fraction? Is that what we're going with, Ridian?
No, so you're going to make a 10
Mm-hmm.
and then have it equal 1 times 10.
Okay.
Now, divide the 1 by 10 and the 10 by 10.
If I took 1 and I divided it by 10, what would I end up with?
1/10.
And how would I write that as a decimal?
0.1.
Good.
It's like 1/10 would be just a 1.
My 10ths place. So you guys know we've gotten so good about our 1s, 10s, hundreds, thousands going to the left of the decimal, right? So now we're going to start going to the right of the decimal. And the one thing that I feel like gets a little tricky is that when we go to the left of the decimal, we start in our 1s place. There is no 1s place for decimals. It immediately starts with
There is not. That's not how it works.
Not how it works. And you'll notice that, 1 second, Ridian. You'll notice that in our 10s, it's just the 10s, and you'll notice the TH addition when we go to the right of the decimal, 10ths, hundredths. They're kind of hard to say, but that's telling everyone that it's a decimal and not a whole number. So far we have 1/10 in words, 1/10 in a picture, 1/10 in a fraction. We have it as a division statement. We have a decimal statement. We've got a whole lot of things going on. So now I want to ask you guys, I hope you have all of this in your notebook. That way you can kind of refer back to it. So both fractions and decimals are kind of like special numbers. They're not our normal numbers, right? They both tell parts of a whole divided. So fractions are parts of a whole, decimals are also parts of a whole. They just look a little bit different. So we're gonna start and we're gonna actually use some fraction bars to represent decimals. So let's draw a fraction bar. And if you have a lined piece of paper, it's super helpful because it keeps your fraction bars like long and skinny and perfect. We know that just a whole fraction bar, not split up or anything, is one whole, right? I have no parts to it. It's just one whole. That's it. So give yourself one whole to work with. And then I'm going to put one below, same size. Okay. And I want you to split that one into 4 equal parts. I will tell you a good trick is to split it and then half, and then split it in half again. So if you go down the half, half is easy to find. And then if you take those halves and you split them again, it's really easy to make fourths. Because 1/4 is half of a half. So now I want to ask you, what would my fraction be for just one of these parts? I have 4 equal parts, just one of them. I want to hear from someone else. What would that be? 1/4. Good, Addie, 1/4. So I know that if I'm working in fourths, 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 will give me a whole, right? And I know that it's 1 out of 4 pieces. That is where we get our 1/4 from, right? We've gotten really good at this, but now we're going to transfer this into decimals. So now we're looking at it and we say, okay, I know that I have 4 pieces. I have 1 of 4 equal parts. One really easy way to think about fourths is to think about quarters. You guys are good with money, especially quarters, right? 1/4 is a quarter. Does anyone have an idea as to why I would say 1/4 is a quarter? Why would that make sense?
It's because if you take 100 and divide it into 4 parts, you get 25. And 1/4 is 25 cents.
Ah, and then I heard Addie say too, it takes 4 quarters to equal $1, right?
And that's 100 cents.
Yep, exactly. So 100 cents split up brings us into 4 quarters. And like Rudian said, a quarter equals 25 cents. So we have 1/4 equals a quarter equals 25 cents. I know that 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 equals a whole. Now, if we think about it as quarters, and let's double check Rudian's thinking. Does 25 cents plus 25 cents plus 25 cents plus 25 cents equal $1? I want you to take a quick second to think about that. Does that work? Oops, sorry guys, my phone locked out on me. So if I did 25 cents plus 25 cents, think about what you know about quarters. Does that work? Yes or no?
It does work.
Well, why does that work, Rudian?
So you know how, do you guys know how to skip count by 25? 25, 50, 75, 100, 125, 150, 100.
Yeah. You're right, Rudian, because each one of these makes 50 cents, right?
Yeah, and then you can combine those two, and then you get $1.
Okay, cool. I love it. Now let's work with, I really think you guys, the easiest starting point at least in my brain, for decimals is money. Just because I think that's where we're exposed to decimals the earliest. And if we assign decimal notation to these like coins that we know, it becomes a lot easier. We know 1/4 is a quarter because it takes 4 quarters. We know that a quarter is worth 25 cents. Now, if we were going to work in tenths, so we're going to do the same thing here. And keep thinking about coins as we go through this, okay? So if I took $1, we're going to pretend this is $1 or a fraction bar, either way. Could be $1 or it could be 1 whole. So give yourself a nice clean fraction bar now. And I want you to split it into 10 pieces. One way that you can do this would be to split it in half. That'll give me 2 pieces. And then you need 4 more lines on each side, because you know that 4 lines gives you 5 pieces. So try your best. You might have to erase a few times, but try to get 10 even pieces here. So double check, make sure, do you have 10 pieces?
I'm using the lines on my notebook because I have my notebook horizontal.
Oh, that's a good idea too.
Yeah, so I have a bar.
Mm-hmm.
I keep making bars and using a pen. And then I'm using all the little blue lines on my paper.
I was just going to show everyone what you're talking about. So Iridian's saying, like, normally your notebook, guys, looks something like this, right? You have your spirals and your holes on the left. He's saying that if you flip it and you go this way with your bar, you can use the lines of your notebook to split it into even sections. That's a really good idea.
Because my original 1 bar.
Mm-hmm. It can be kind of hard to split evenly.
10 people has 10 areas that have blue lines in them. So if I need the more tenths in it, I can.
Good. Okay. I'm glad you figured that out. All right. So we are now going to use decimal notation. Excuse me. Whoa. Decimal notation to talk about tenths. So I want to ask Miss Aaliyah. I have 10 pieces, right? What would one of these pieces be, Aaliyah?
1/10.
Yes, ma'am. 1/10 as a fraction, or 1 out of 10, right? Any idea how we would write that as a decimal? Any ideas? Does anyone have an idea? If I have one of these pieces.
Dimes. It's dimes.
It's dimes. So I'm going to go here. If I was to write it in money, I'd have $0.10, right? If I was working in just money, I'd have $0.10, which Iridian said is a dime. A dime is 10 cents. Or if we want it just to write it as just a simple decimal, we'll write it that way. So with money, we know that we have 2 place values, 10 cents. If we're going to write it in just decimal notation, we can write it with just 0 and 1/10. So our 1 is in the tenths place. And I would make sure, again, I have all of this in my notes because you're going to have to use it today, okay, guys? So a dime gives me 1 out of 10 because it takes 10 dimes to make $1. Or another way to think about this, you guys, is that it takes 10 pennies to make a dime. If we had to draw a fraction bar for pennies, oh my goodness gracious, it would be nearly impossible because you'd have to have 100 equal pieces. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to erase this here for you. I am going to draw this If you want to draw this with me, that's fine, but it's going to be kind of a lot of work. So I feel like drawing 100 pieces would be really difficult to do. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to split this up. I know that I have 10 equal parts, right? And within that, it takes 10 pennies to make each one of these, each 10th. So basically the way you want to think about it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pennies to make 1/10. How many pennies does it take to make a dollar?
100.
Okay, and I heard Addie in the background, thanks. So 100 pennies to make a dollar. So 1 penny would be 1/100th of a dollar. It takes 100 pennies. If I just have one of them, then it's just 1 out of that 100 pennies. I could write this as $0 and 1/100th. Do you see how our place value moved over? This was our 10ths place. And this here is our 100ths place. Guys, decimal place value is very, very similar. It's still going to be tenths, hundredths, thousandths. It's the same exact way. It's just the only thing is we skip our zeros place, or our ones place, excuse me. We don't have a ones place. Sorry, my camera locked out again. There is no ones place in decimals because you don't have a whole one. So the only difference will be you kind of just skip over the ones place, start with tenths, hundredths, thousandths, etc. We know that a penny is 1/100th of a dollar. Or if you want to write it in just regular decimal notation, it's 0 and 1/100th. I have a 0 in my tenths place because 1 penny alone is not enough to make a tenth. I can't say 1 penny equals a dime. No, it takes 10 pennies to equal a dime. And then if I continued on, which I'm not going to keep going because it could go on forever and ever and ever and ever, I could do the same thing with thousandths, and it would say 1 out of 1,000 and keep going on and on. But again, you could do this pattern forever. So I want to give you guys a little bit of a reference here. So I want to put this up here. I am not actually going to write it because it would take me forever to write it. But I do want to give you guys a quick second to write down this chart, and we're going to kind of read through it together. So I'm going to just zoom in on my book here. And that way you guys can see it, but me writing this would take far too long and it'd be just a big waste of time. So here's what we got here, and let me kind of get this at a better angle, just 1 second. All right, so we know, we talked about this, 1 dime is 1/10 of a dollar or 1/10. 2 dimes, 2/10 of a dollar, 2/10. And this pattern continues on and on and on and on. Because we know that 1 dime is 10 cents, 2 dimes is 20 cents, 3 dimes is 30 cents, 4 dimes is 40 cents. You guys don't have to write the whole chart down if you kind of get the pattern. If you want the whole thing written down, that's fine with me. But I'd say at least have one. You could do 1, 5, and 10, and then I feel like you'd probably generally understand the pattern.
Does anyone know what 0.2 is, though?
What was that?
Does anyone know what 0.2 is, too?
0.2 is? I mean, if you want to do it, yeah, you can do that.
Well, 0.2 is actually also 1/5.
Oh, it is.
It's also 2/10. So if you ever need to convert,
See it just a little bit closer. We were showing how it takes 10 dimes to make a dollar, 100 pennies to make a dollar. And then if we go into the thousandths place, like we were talking about, the same idea. We don't have a piece of money in our system that is 1/1000th of a dollar. It'd be 1/10 of a penny, and we don't go any smaller than a penny. It kind of explains it to you here. The thousandths place is there, and it's 1 over from the hundredths place, just like in regular place value, but we don't have like, there's no coin you could assign to that. So really it's just going over another decimal place. They tell you 1/10 of a penny. I think that's kind of confusing. I just think 1/1000th is easier.
Well, I have an example.
What's that? You have an example?
You know at the stores how like if something costs $4.99, you
Mhm.
see it as 4.99.
Mm-hmm. It would still be,
It's
well,
kind
that
of an
would be
example.
99, but that'd be 99 out of 100 though. See, we don't have anything in the thousandths place. Some countries have much smaller currency. We don't have anything smaller. So I want to do a couple example problems with you guys really quick before we get going. So I'm going to draw on my screen, so bear with me. So 7/100ths. It says write the fraction as a decimal number and then say the number. Well, I know for sure that I have 0 holes, right? There's no holes in this. It's smaller than a hole. So I have 0 holes, and we always read our decimal as and 7/100ths. Can someone tell me where my 7 would go? I want to hear from someone else. Justin, where would my 7 go? Would it go 1 place value over or 2 place values over?
You would go 2 place values over because in 100 there are 2 zeros.
Exactly. It's in my hundredths place, right? And we said, here's our tenths. Here's our hundredths. If it was 70 hundredths, then we would put it there. But here's what we got. Now, and you guys could write this in your notebook, maybe just do 7/100ths equals 0 and 7/100ths. Let's hear from Miss Maddie. So Maddie, if I was working here, I have 16/100ths. Where would that go after my decimal?
The 16, I don't know. I couldn't hear you very well.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so if we're working at our decimal, Maddie, would we start in the tenths place or the hundredths place? What would we put after our decimal?
the 1, I think.
Mm-hmm. And would you put it right here next to the decimal, or would you scoot it over?
Right next to the decimal, I think.
Yeah, and why did you say that? You're right. Do you want us to work through it? So we have 16/100ths, right? We know that 16, it does have a group of 10, doesn't it? There's a group of 10 right here. So we do have 1/10, and then there are 6/100ths left over. So you're right, Maddie, and wherever the place value is that you're working in, you want your number to stop there. So 16/100ths, you see how it stops at the hundredths place? I read the hundredths value. Who could help me with 4/10ths? Where would my 4 go?
Right after the 0, or the and the decimal.
Why do we say that, Rivian? Why would it go there?
Because it's not on 100. It's not 100.
It's in the tenths place value, right? We know that's the tenths. That's where it goes. Who is feeling up to the challenge for 5/1000ths? I want to hear from someone else. 5/1000ths. Where would that go? We could go 1 place value over, 2 place values over, or 3 place values over. Anyone have an idea? Bella B, where do you think the thousandths would go?
I think it would be able to go on the lines.
Okay, which one though? Where would my 5 go?
Your 5 would be in front of the 0.
Well, we know we have 0 holes, right? And what's 1 place value over here? We said tenths. hundredths, thousandths. We're working in the THs are so hard. We're working in thousandths. So we'd be way over here in 5 thousandths. So the tricky thing about decimal, guys, is it's kind of backwards from how we're used to place value. We're used to place value working right to left, and now we're going left to right. So I want to give you one more example. I want to look at 13 because I think 13 is a little tricky. We're going to have 0 holes because it's not a mixed number, right? There's no holes here. I have 409 thousandths. Keep in mind, I want my number decimal to stop at where I read the place value. So if I'm reading this as 409 thousandths, my last number needs to be in the thousandths place because that's what's being read. So if I put 409 in here, it will stop at the thousandths place because I have tenths, hundredths, thousandths. I have 409, and this is my last place value, thousandths. Do you guys see how that works? So you want your last number to stop at whatever place value you're reading. So a good example would be 15 here. I want 3 hundredths. So my 3 needs to be in the hundredths place. So I know that if I put my 3 right next to my decimal, that would be read as 3 tenths. I'm skipping the tenths, I have no tenths. But if I put my 3 in my hundredths place, then I now have 3 hundredths. So I'll give you guys a quick second if you want to write this down. I think the best rule to remember this is you want your final number to end in the place value that you read. So if you're reading it as 16 thousandths, your 16 needs to stop in the thousandths place. So we'd have 0 and I know my tenths, and if you want to draw the little lines for yourself, you can. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths. I know that my 16 needs to stop in the thousandths place, and now I'm going to work back from right to left. I think that's the easiest way to do it. Like in this one, it says, write it as a decimal, then say the number. I personally think it's easier to say the number first because it tells me where to put my place value, but it's up to you guys, whichever way your brain works. I just find it easier if I read it out, then I can put the number in that place. Let's do one word problem together, and then I'm gonna let you guys go. All right, I'm gonna do 21 with you. A beehive is home to 1,000 bees. If 235 bees are out gathering pollen, what decimal number do these bees represent? Well, let's start with a fraction first. Could anyone give me a fraction of 235 bees out of 1,000? How would we write?
235 over 1,000.
Yes, 235 over 1,000. We're talking about 235 as our numerator, and our total is 1,000. Ooh, mine's a little messy, but you get the idea. There's 1,000. All right, so 235 are out. I have 1,000 in total. How could I write this as a decimal? I want to hear from someone different. Give everyone a second to think. Remember, if it's 235 thousandths, my number needs to end in the thousandth place. So I have tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Could anyone tell me where my numbers need to go?
The 2 has to go right next to the decimal, and then the 3 after, and then the 5 after the 3.
Why do you say that, Miss Amelia?
Because from 409, like 1,000, that one, the
Mm-hmm.
other one, it's, the 409, that question that we did,
Mm-hmm.
I looked back and the numbers were like the exact same as this one, and it would look like more
What is this place value at the end here, Amelia?
1,000.
Thousandths. Yeah, exactly. And so if it's 235 thousandths, we need our number to end in the thousandth place. Good. All right, so guys, as we go through this today, think about money. Money is a really good one to think about for tenths and hundredths. Again, thousands kind of get beyond money. And then think about your place value. So always think, okay, don't have any holes here. From the right of my decimal, there is no ones place in decimals. There is no such thing. So I have my tenths, my hundredths, and then my thousandths. I would make sure you definitely have this in your notebook somewhere. I'm gonna fix my, just one second. It's kind of funky when you try to type on Zoom. So let's make sure we have a chart somewhere with this. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths.
I do. It goes up to the normal like thousands and then down to thousandths.
Mm-hmm. So from the right of my decimal, I have my tenths, my hundredths, and my thousandths. Make sure you have that written somewhere on your paper and know that however you read the number is where your decimal needs to stop. So when I think of 235 thousandths, I actually have 2 tenths, 3 hundredths, and 5 thousandths. Just like how you would split it apart. Don't worry about that too much yet because I know that that can get a little bit tricky. But I really want you guys thinking about these tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Again, it's very, very hard to say. And really working on where, if I'm working in thousandths, where would my decimal go? If I said I have just 6 thousandths, 6 out of 1,000, a very, very small number, I would know that my 6 still needs to go in the thousandths place, and then I hold these place values with zeros, just like you do to the left of the decimal, okay? All right.